In the previous series, Jin Young met his father in prison. The soldiers arrested the boy and sent him to the most dangerous prison, which is located on an island far from civilization. The demon helps Jinen develop his magical abilities. A boy meets an old man whose name is Gu Yang and finds out that this is the most respected person in prison. Gu Yang takes him as his assistant and will become a mentor for the boy. Jinen was told the story that Gu Yang was the best sculptor in the whole empire and a martial artist, so everyone respects him. Prison inmates wanted to beat Jinen up, but he used magic for the first time and was able to fight them off. Gu Yang invites the boy to become a mentor and teach him martial arts. Jinin trained in martial arts for a year and learned how to combine them with magic. Jinin meditated and tried to accumulate magical energy in himself, but suddenly his energy turned black. He did not understand what was happening to him. This energy began to absorb him, and he felt all of it was washed from dark energy. He realized that he just needed to calm down, and in order to stop the outburst of this black energy, he needed to stop the Qi energy in his body. When he stopped the Qi energy inside his body, the black energy disappeared, and an explosion occurred around him, and smoke appeared. The demon did not understand what happened, and decided to ask the boy what it had just been. But the guy could not answer him, so immediately, Jinin confessed to the demon that a huge amount of energy had just appeared in his case. He asked Certain if he knew what had just happened. Certain explained that the power of the magic stone and the energies of the seal are mixed together, and in connection with this there is a huge gap in energy. Jinin was very surprised when he heard about the fact that Prince together with the stone are connected in forces, and the demon was very surprised that the boy did not know this. Certain said that the energies of the magic stone and the magic seal have been mixing their energies for a very long time, and it has accumulated a lot, so there was an explosion. Jinin was very angry that the demons didn't tell him this before, because he knew about it all this time, but it seemed obvious to the demon. The boy concluded that the speed of his development increased so quickly only because he had a magic stone with him all the time. Certain said, "What is it?" And everything is obvious because the stone gives him magical abilities, and explained to the guy that he is not a genius. Jinin was upset because all this time he thought that he had talent. But now when he found out that his rapid growth is due to the fact that the magic stone gives him energy, he felt offended. The magic stone, the energy of the seal, together found synergy among themselves, and all the time filled the boy with the energy that his body lacked. The demon told the guy that when I didn't come here, he was sure that the fourth magic circle would be the limit of this boy's ability. But everything turned out to be much better than he thought. Jinin actually had good potential and could develop his magical abilities much further than the fourth magic circle. Jin Young began to look at his hand from different angles, and he wanted to feel the energy that was passing through his veins. He clenched his fist and decided that from now on he would work even harder to see how far he could go. New leaves were starting to bloom on the tree branch, which meant that the weather was getting warmer on the island. Jinen meditated on stones with his master Gu Yang for 2 years. Every day they honed their skills and improved their Qi energy. Gu Yang constantly. I think that the boy is developing very fast. They have been studying martial arts for only 2 years, but this boy's ability has reached the master with 30 years of practice. The old man taught this guy almost everything he knew. He himself wondered if it was worth teaching this guy the last volume of Tiantan. The whole problem with this book was that it was never supposed to get into the outside world, and ordinary people would not have the right to use it. And the very last house was always to be kept in the strictest confidence and only be shown to the elite. But the old man at one time studied the last volume, and he knew everything about what was told there. He was worried about the question. Should he share this knowledge with the boy? Is he really a cheater who can learn this knowledge? Gu Yang decided that it would be right to teach the boy this knowledge. After all, he has outstanding abilities, and who, if not he, should possess this knowledge? Jinin walked up to the old man. I stopped right in front of him. He asked Grandpa how long had he been waiting for him. Gu Yang replied that everything is fine and waited as long as necessary. He praised the boy for the fact that his profound energy is growing at an incredibly fast rate. Jin Young replied that it was all thanks to his grandfather and the workouts he showed him. The old man carefully looked at the boy, and he thought about something, as if I were gathering my thoughts in order to tell him one very important news. After a few seconds, he nevertheless decided to tell the boy that he was going to pass on to him all the knowledge that was in the last volume of Tiantan Guyang. I will explain to the guy that among all this volume is the most basic, because it explains all the truths of the great martial arts. Thanks to the knowledge that is in the third volume of Tiantan, he will be able to throw out inner strength from the depths of his soul into the outside world, moving it at will to where he needs it. The old man raised his hand up and tried to collect all the boy's attention on what he would say now, and he explained that this knowledge allows you to control the energy of Qi Gu Yang, said that in the future he will definitely teach the boy this knowledge, but he needs to grow up a little more in order to study the last volume of Tiantan. After that, the old man closed his eyes again and continued to meditate while sitting on a stone. The boy looked at him carefully and said that he would study this knowledge with pleasure. It was already dark outside. It was evening. The boy was sitting on a stone, drawing strange hieroglyphs in the sand with a stick. He sat on this stone for a very long time. He tried to draw all the hieroglyphs that he knew, and therefore spent a lot of time on it. At some point, Jinan took a very deep breath and froze as if he was upset because he forgot how one of the hieroglyphs is drawn. Certain noticed that something was wrong with the boy. He did not understand what it was, and therefore decided to ask why he was so upset. Jinan told the demon that he was drawing ancient scripts that his father studied at the request of the imperial palace. The boy remembers all the hieroglyphs from this script. He told the demon that he began to understand the meaning of all these words. Previously, they seemed to him unrelated, as if they had no contact, but now the boy began to catch the meaning of these words. One of these hieroglyphs was actually a spell, and an unusual, simple spell, a real martial arts spell. Jinan said that he still did not know the exact name of this spell, but he tried to translate these symbols into human language and realized that literally, but it translates as absorbing the energy of heaven and earth and controlling the soul. Sirkin did not understand anything. This spell must be very strong, because if it is able to absorb the forces of heaven and earth, then this spell has destructive abilities in it. This is the magic of controlling your soul. It is very dangerous, and usually such spells belong to dark magic. Jinan, well, what does he tell about the rest of the videos that he managed to translate? And he said that the second plate says that the received magical power can be released if you learn how to use it. Demon Certain was very interested in what the spell was, because he understood that if you use this great demon ability correctly, when you can reach incredible heights. But the boy was worried about completely different thoughts about this spell, and did not pay attention to the power and destructive malice that owned this spell. He was more worried that people want to learn this magic and won't let his father quietly walk away from learning this magic. People want to wield the power of this demonic spell. Jinan was upset when he realized why his father was still being held in custody, understood that his father just wants to save the world from the catastrophe that can happen if this magic falls into the wrong hands. The demon suggested that the boy learn this spell himself and combine it with his martial arts. He said that there is no more suitable candidate on this planet to learn this magic. But the boy did not agree with Diamond because he believed that if you learn this spell, then he himself will become a demon. But Certain explained to him that everything works very differently. He told the boy that if he has this magic, then most likely you will be able to properly assimilate the power of the magic stone and wash all the magic seal. In addition, he believed that the boy still did not have enough energy to release all this destructive magic. But if the boy agreed to learn this magic, he would later be able to master the unique ability to use lightning strikes. Jinan was interested in the possibility of using lightning strikes, but the demon at that moment began to feel embarrassed because he said too much should not have told the boy about it. But it was too late. Certain explained to him that no matter how much he wanted to master this magic now, he would not succeed because nothing would come of it with his current abilities, because he was still very weak. His heart would simply burn out, and the boy could die because of this. Jinan was upset when he found out that he could not learn this spell. He was already ready to learn it in order to possess the ability of lightning strikes in the future. But now, it already seemed pointless to him. Jinan decided to give up on me, and decided that he needed to improve his physical spiritual indicators in order to still study it, and he had 3 years to prepare for the study. The demon at that moment stopped understanding the guy. He thought that the boy had completely lost his mind. Jinen continued to study martial arts every day. Together with his master, he worked on a sculpture in the morning. Although it helped to collect concentration and hone his skills, Jin Young told the old man about the spell that he had recently learned, and the old man thought for a long time what to answer the boy. He again asked if Jin Young was wrong when he said about the technique of heaven and earth. Jinen was absolutely sure that the character he translated literally sounded exactly like that, and he saw it with his own eyes. The boy remembered that the demon divided this spell into 3 parts. The first of the parts was the technique of heaven and earth soul control energy absorption. It is better to hide the information about energy absorption and soul control and tell grandfather about martial art magic would not be a good idea. Gu Yang understood that the boy was not telling him something, but he did not know what exactly, and extracting information from him would not be the best idea. Gu Yang began to scratch his beard with his hand and wondered what kind of martial art it was. He told the guy that despite his poor training and insufficient knowledge of martial arts, this spell was very good and would be useful in martial arts. The old man thought about the fact that this spell contained great power and it could be very dangerous. He tried to warn the boy that the study of this spell would lead to bad consequences, and if he was serious about studying it, he would need to be very careful. Jinin decided to ask a question that worried him a lot. He wanted to know if he would study the technique that the old man taught him, and at the same time, study this spell. Will he have problems with this, or everything will be fine? The old man replied that the whole reason why Tiantan is called one of the most important and powerful martial arts techniques is not only that it is not able to teach a person to control his Kai energy. This technique harmonizes easily with other martial arts, and is the foundation on which other martial arts techniques can be applied, and there is not a single technique better than it. Thanks to her, it was necessary to balance her strength, because even if the source of strength in a person was weak, she still allowed her to collect enough Qi energy in her body, which is why she was one of the 3 great martial arts techniques. Jin Young was very happy when he found out that he could learn several different techniques at the same time, and they would not interfere with each other. Gu Yang allowed the boy to learn this heaven and earth technique. It seemed to him a great martial art, and he told the boy that he would need to learn this technique very hard. After that, Gu Yang said goodbye to the boy and said that it was time for him to leave. He had an urgent dialogue with a guy named Doju before leaving. The old man asked the boy to make the last adjustments to the sculpture so that it looked excellent. Jinen was ready to spend the whole night improving this statue because he felt a strong surge of strength in himself when he found out that he could learn 2 techniques because his grandfather gave him permission to do so. He waited patiently for a chance to practice learning a new technique. He wanted that moment to come as quickly as possible. He wanted to drink yang energy during the day when everyone is still sleeping, while studying the technique and absorbing yin energy. And if he manages to correctly schedule his day for different workouts, then before going to bed he will have time to practice the Tiantan martial arts technique. He will be able to create a cycle of 2 energies in his body that will complement each other. Jinin continued to strike the instrument with a hammer and make a sculpture out of raw stone. He could not quit everything and immediately study new technology. He needed to finish. So and business. He needed to finish the statue so that the old man could be proud of him. He decided that in 3 days try to have time to finish this statue, but for this, he would need to do only sculpture for 3 days and abandon the rest of his affairs. This is the only way he could free himself more time in the future. Jinin heard someone's steps behind him. He was surprised because usually no one walks in this part of the island, but now a person has appeared here. This was the same big guy that the guy recently defeated in a duel with 1 blow of his magic. This man came here to talk to the boy. Jinin told him that today he should have time to finish work on this statue, and he needs to work very hard today, and there is no time for talking. The big man was very serious. He came here with bad intentions. He saw that the boy was busy, and it was only to his advantage. He grabbed a stick. I left with all my strength after that. I approached the boy with very quiet steps, so that he could not even hear. Jin Young didn't pay attention to the big man, and was busy sculpting. He wanted to finish it as soon as possible, so he didn't even pay attention to the presence of this person. The big man waited for the moment when the boy was completely immersed in the process, and after that he swung his stick in order to hit him, and Jinnen, at that moment, continued to work on the statue. Previously, this man was the second in command. On this island, and everyone respected him, he had an authority that allowed him to feel calm and confident in this prison. Only the old man Gu Yang was more important than him, but he was not interested in being the most important person on the island. He pursued completely different goals, and therefore the big man could behave like the main one among all the prisoners. He was their leader. He was satisfied with the authority that he owned. Thanks to this, he could eat normally food, unlike the rest of the prisoners. When others were working hard, he could afford to rest and choose the easiest job. But then his sweet life on this island ended because this guy appeared, and everything changed dramatically. This boy became the old man's favorite, and his authority grew every day, and the strength of this boy appeared more and more. The prisoners saw that the boy was getting stronger every day, and they began to respect him due to this. The boy's authority grew, and all the prisoners began to treat him as the second most important person in this prison. Because of Jinnen, the reputation of this man was shaken, and they stopped showing respect for him. He became the most ordinary prisoner, and he had to work every day just like everyone else. He could not accept the fact that from now on no one respects him anymore. He did not want to be the third most important person in this prison. He believed that two dominant leaders who lead all the rest were enough. He became an opinion leader already at the age of 22, when he was still very young, and already at such a young age he made sure that everyone respected him and listened to his opinion. For 10 whole years, he tried to maintain his reputation and did not allow anyone to take his place. He closely watched all the people who surrounded him and crossed any attempts to overthrow him from his position as a leader. There were a lot of people who wanted to take his place. They were all waiting for the right moment to take advantage of him and end this man's leadership in prison. But he succeeded. Let's fight back against whole crowds of prisoners. He fought off with his own hands from everyone who tried to initiate an attack or ruin his reputation. He was ready to make any sacrifices and leave people crippled or even kill in order to keep his place in this prison. He was not ready to give this child all the glory and respect that he had achieved for many years. He was very angry with this boy and believed that he was the most ordinary monster who has amazing abilities that you don't tell anyone about. He had to live in constant fear for 2 years because the boy would fight him back. He was so strong that the big man did not have the strength to resist him, and because of this he constantly lived in fear and hid in the corners like a rat. He did not want to just give his second place to this child, and was ready to go to extreme measures again in order to regain his former reputation. He waited for the old man to leave and go about his business so that the child would be left alone. He had been waiting for this moment for a long time, and now this guy is sitting right in front of him and suspects absolutely nothing. The only thing that could help Jin Young right now was only the eyes that could have been on the back of his head. But since he did not have them, this was the perfect opportunity to strike. He took his stick in his hand and decided to deliver a crushing blow that could kill Jinnen. The guy all this time was engaged in improving and finalizing his statue, trying to make it perfect. Jinnen noticed that Uncle Xing had been standing behind him for a very long time and did not make any sounds. It looked very suspicious. He remembered the day when he used his magic for the first time and dealt a strong blow to this man, and realized that he must have been very angry with him after this incident, and decided to take revenge. Certain had the very eyes on the back of the boy's head. He saw that this man was going to attack him and warned the guy to dodge right away. He did not have enough reaction speed to completely evade the blow, and the stick still managed to damage him in the shoulder. Jinnen felt a strong pain in his shoulder and nearly passed out from the pain, but still managed to restrain himself. He grabbed his hammer with which he usually worked on the statue and decided to use it as a weapon. The boy decided to hit first and then see where his opponent was. When he hit, there was no one behind him, and he couldn't deal damage, but that meant he had time to dodge. Jinnen turned his head to the enemy, but there was no one there. His enemy disappeared somewhere. Uncle Xing moved fast enough. Even though he looked very big and heavy, his movements were still light and agile. The boy should have understood where his opponent was now. All this time he was in the dark because he could not find his enemy, but then he heard that the sounds of steps were heard behind him and realized where Sin was. He turned his head and saw that the enemy was already too close. He needed to lean there from the new one. Jinnen no longer had time to jump back or dodge, so he decided to block. He put his hand in front of him and wanted to block the blow with a stick. He even managed to grab a stick and stop it from moving. Xing was very surprised when he saw the quick reaction of this child. He did not understand why the boy had such a speed of movement. Jinnen. Why stick on himself, and the thug lost his balance, he started to fall. Jinnen decided to take advantage of the fact that his enemy was off balance and wanted to strike him with a counterpunch that would allow him to briefly silence his enemy. He didn't hit the hammer right away. Instead, the boy decided that a headbutt would be enough to knock the man off balance and stun him for a certain amount of time. Blood began to drip from Sin's mouth. The blow that the boy inflicted on him was very strong, and the thugs did not expect that his body would not withstand this blow. Xing flew back and hit his head on the ground several times. Jinnen landed such a strong blow that the man kicked off the ground several times and rolled to the edge of the ledge from which he could fall. Below were very sharp stones like thorns that could pierce a person. Jinnen saw that his blow was very strong, and because of this, Sin could fall off the cliff and hit the sharp stones Sin could not resist, and due to inertia, he nevertheless fell off the edge of the cliff and began to fly down. Jinnen couldn't let this man die, even though he just wanted to kill him, so he ran to the edge of the ledge and held out his hand. At the very last second, he still managed to grab the man by the hand and hold him tightly. The boy was holding this big man with one hand. His strength was enough to keep him from falling. Jinnen told him to hold on tight, because if he didn't hold on, then he would definitely fall on those sharp rocks and die. Sin looked down and realized that he still did not want to die. He wanted to stay alive at any cost. Sin began to cry like a child and asked to be saved. It was clear from him that he was not ready to die such a death. This man wanted to live a little more. Certain watched the whole fight and didn't understand why the boy had to save this one coming. He just wanted to kill the boy. The demon said that no one will know what happened here, and the death of this person will not affect the boy in any way. But Jin Young asked the demon to look at the other side. There, on the other side, there were a lot of people. They watched all this time what was happening now. All these people could then tell the guards that the boy killed this man. He couldn't let these people accuse him of killing whom he plotted me to. Jin Young did not want bad words to start appearing in prison, and everyone to think that he was a murderer. The boy began to pull this hairy man up and asked him to hold on tight so that he would not fall. He still managed to pull out the thug and put him on the ground. The big man could not believe that he still remained alive. The boy was very angry with this man. He began to envelop rage, so he warned this thug that if he did this again, then the boy would simply be forced to kill him. Sin cried like a girl. Tears flowed down his face and drooling from his nose, snot flowed from his nose, and he said that he would never try to kill this boy again. Jinnen was still angry with him, but he had to believe the words of this man. After all, he obviously did not want to kill him and hoped that this big man was still telling the truth. Jinnen believed that it was his fault that he was attacked. He behaved carelessly and was attentive enough. He looked at the stick and thought that if it was a real sword, then his arm would definitely be cut off with one blow and he would probably already be dead. He relaxed too much, deducted that his abilities had grown, and he became much stronger. He completely forgot that this is a prison, and here you need to be constantly vigilant. Careful, because everyone wants to attack you. Jinnen asked the demons to constantly be on the lookout and make sure that no one gets too close to him, because if the boy dies, then the demon will most likely die too, and Certain rushed about with his request. He did not mind watching the safety of the boy. I promise his approaching opponents it was already nighttime. The clouds were floating in. It was dark on the island in the dark sky. The head of the system stood near the window and watched the clouds float across the sky. His office was illuminated by the moonlight that came through the window. The head of the prison stood near the window and held his hands behind his back. He heard someone knocking on his door. He allowed the man to enter his office and waited for him to enter. Old man Gu Yang entered the office. He immediately apologized for such a sudden intrusion and bowed to the head of the prison. and the head himself was surprised that the old man decided to come to him so late. Gu Yang silently stood at the door and did not utter a word. His appearance was quite neat. He had time to prepare a little for the meeting. Concern could be seen in his eyes. The head of the doju prison decided to ask the old man what was the purpose of his visit. Yang Gu said in a very serious voice that he had a special request to the head of the prison and would like to express it. The prisoners, as always, worked in stone mines and mined stone. Some of them transported it on carts, and some with beaters from rocks at that time. While the prisoners were engaged in carrying and processing stone, the guy sat and all this time carved statues from stone. On this day it was especially hot, and so hot that some people began to feel dizzy and they lost consciousness. And today everyone worked without outerwear because it was leaking to your body and a blow. If you continued to work in t-shirts, the guards shouted very loudly that it was time for lunch. And after the break, all the prisoners had to return to their jobs again. One of the prisoners called the rest of the workers to go along with him for a break. Precious lunch time could not be wasted. They began to communicate with each other about the fact that they were already very hungry. And it's good that it was finally time for lunch. But the boy sat all this time and continued to work on the statue. He got up from his chair and decided to look at how this statue will look like in the future. At that moment, he suddenly realized that it had already been 6 years since that conversation with old man Gu Yang. During this time, a lot of things managed to happen, and the guy himself had already grown very much and ceased to be a child. A hairy man approached him and greeted him. Sin asked the guy if he was going to have lunch now, or continue to work on this statue again and skip doing it. Jin smiled and replied that they could go ahead without him, and then he would catch up with the guy, did not hold a grudge against this person, and communicated with him very politely. Sin felt very embarrassed. This is the act that he did. He was still uncomfortable in front of the guy. He wanted to somehow make amends for his guilt, but did not know how Shin bowed to the boy and said that he would go to lunch in these 6 years. The biggest change happened in his relationship with the hairy uncle Sin. On the day when he fell on the boy and wanted to kill him, something amazing happened that no one expected. Gu Yang found out that this big man had attempted on his student and met him in a neutral territory that few people knew about in prison. There were no guards and old men to do anything with this man. The thug understood all the dangerous situations, apologized to the old man. He decided not to punish this stupid man and asked him to treat the guy as he would treat his boss. Now this child was like a master to him. Gu Yang explained to him that this child could have done a terrible thing and let him die, but he still decided to save him, and therefore he deserves the kindness and respect that Xing should repay him. The big man bowed to the old man and replied that he would treat the child as his boss if Gu Yang himself asked for it, and from that moment, Uncle Harry became Jinen's assistant. The sun was very bright that day, and it was almost impossible to hide from it. The boy raised his head up and covered his eyes with his hand. It was very hot, and the sun's rays poked around his body. Old man Gu Yang said that the hotter the sun, the better for him. Yin and Yang is the purest harmony between heaven and earth, and the boy had to accept them in the incarnation in which they were. Jinen listened to all the advice of the old man and tried to do as he says, and not object to him. The boy remembers his grandfather that it was already 6 years after their conversation, and it was finally necessary to make decisions. He lowered his head down and thought. Then he still asked his grandfather, "Is it possible to get out of this prison?" He asked how strong he could become if he could still master the martial arts. The old man is not ready for such a question. He needed time to think about what to answer the boy because this is a very difficult question. He told him a story about how he learned the martial arts on his own after being given them by his master, and he never tried to compare himself to others because it's wrong. He admitted that his mentor was one of the top 10 masters in the world, and there were always various legendary rumors about his mentor. He would never have been able to compete with her because he would have simply been killed, but he was sure that he was still not inferior to his mentor in terms of strength. The old man asked the boy if he really wanted to learn martial arts, and if he was ready for it. Jinnen imagined all 10 members of the best martial artists. It was 10 heavenly great masters, and he dreamed of becoming one of them. The boy understood why he could not compare himself with them. After all, they were great people who devoted their entire lives to the study of martial arts. It was impossible to compare with them. It would sound like a joke if now someone from outside heard the boy's thoughts. They would probably laugh over the past 5 years of training. I don't even understand if he has the right to compare himself with anyone, but he was sure of one thing exactly to his grandfather, the martial arts that he taught him. This is definitely not a joke. Jin Young replied that he would study martial arts and fulfill all the requests of his grandfather. No matter how hard they were, Gu Yang told him that he would tell him about all the nuances at night. There was no time to do it now, so I just had to keep working. Night fell. They met on the edge of one of the largest mountains that were on this island. They stood on top, looked at the big forest. The old man was ready to tell this boy the secrets that would happen to him. He told him that he would teach him one of the great techniques called Shinzubekt. Gu Yang decided to demonstrate this technique to the guy in order for him to better understand how it differs from other techniques. He later said that this technique involves hundreds of different movements in it. There is never a beginning and an end, and it shimmers like water. The forms of this technique were endless. It never ended. The owner of this technique could generate any ways to use it as he needed it. Gu Yang explained that the most important thing in this technique is that what is most appreciated is its harmony. Thanks to it, it is easy to control Qi energy during movement. The fighters of the Central Lands call this technique Oriental Dragon Breath. Gu Yang tried so hard to show the boy all the best aspects of this technique that he even forgot that he was already too old. His body could not withstand such loads, so he began to cough up blood. He admitted that his body is no longer the same as before, and he is not able to use this technique because it can simply deplete his body and kill him. The boy was delighted because he understood that this technique of martial arts is now absolutely free and few people know it. Therefore, it would be very pleasant for him to learn this technique. The old man told the boy that thanks to him, he would be able to reach incredible heights, but first, he had to work very hard and work hard to learn it. But Jinan did not care at all that it could be very difficult because he wanted to gain freedom at any cost, no matter how much strength he would need to spend for this. Gu Yang was surprised when he saw the desire for freedom in this boy. He had never seen such a desire and zeal to be free like his. The old man became very interested in what kind of freedom the boy was telling him now. He did not understand the guy wants to escape from prison and become free, or does he want to train with martial arts and be free to use? But this doesn't make any sense, because the guy himself understood what he was talking about. It was the most important thing for the old man, and it was important for him to understand that the boy was able to develop and go further. Gu Yang decided to tell him about a place no one knows about. It was a secret that the old man never told anyone. He invited the boy to follow him and look at this place. Gu Yang told the head of the prison that he had one request that he would like to voice. The head of the prison was very surprised when the old man decided to personally ask for something from him and was ready to listen to the request. Gu Yang's request was that the head of the prison allow the boy named Jinan to move freely around the prison at any time. He wanted the boy to be able to walk around the island wherever he pleases without the supervision of guards. In return, he was ready to do one unique thing for a month for the head of the prison, which he could not refuse. This proposal interested the head of the prison. He decided to find out what kind of unique thing this old man can do in 1 month. Gu Yang said that this unique thing belongs to the work he usually does, which is to work on statues. Dodge is surprised to see all that was required of him was to give the freedom to the boy to move around the island without guards. But he was not ready to agree to this proposal so immediately. After all, it was very unexpected, and the head of the prison became interested in why the old man was doing so much for this child. He asked if there was anything else that needed to be done for him. Gu Yang said that for the time being, he didn't need anything else, only the fulfillment of this request. The head of the prison agreed and replied that he had been with them since the child and provided him with freedom in the Stone Mountains, but he warned that it is strictly forbidden to leave the territory of the island. After all, if this happens, then it will be regarded as an escape, and both of them will be very severely punished. The old man agreed with these rules. Gu Yang also asked to be given the opportunity to use the eastern cave for their own purposes. The head of the prison agreed with this request and allowed them to use the oriental beads, refused that they can do whatever they want there, because this place is empty anyway, and nothing happens there. Guyang thanked Doju for agreeing to this proposal, after which he left the office of the head of the prison. When Guyang brought the boy to this cave, it was already morning. They were standing right in front of the entrance to it. The old man told the boy a story about how this cave was found during excavations about 50 years ago. It was used as a house for workers. After the liberation of the mountains in the west, housing for workers and prisoners was moved there, and this cave became completely empty because it was too far from the developments. But the old man believed that this cave was not useless, and it could be very useful to them in the study of martial techniques. He said in this cave, there is one hidden place that is known only to the old man. Nobody except him knows about this place. This place once saved an old man when he was between life and death. They walked through the tunnels of this cave for a long time, and at some point, the old man stopped holding a torch in his hands and told the boy that they had already come. In front of them was a waterfall with hot water. It was a kind of geyser. The old man told the boy that this was the very secret of this cave. Guyang told him that he called this cave Yulyanchan. The old man was very grateful to this cave, but so far, he did not tell the boy why he said that the guy would soon find out everything himself. Every day, I studied martial arts techniques Matcha trained all day long, and whatever the weather was outside, it only tempered his spirit. His clothes were wet because it was raining, but that still didn't stop him from training. Jin Young continued to hone his skills under the supervision of his mentor. At night, he immersed his body in the warm waters that were in the cave and relaxed his muscles. This source filled him with energy. A drop of morning race flowed from a leaf into a tree. Jinan continued to work on statues and showed his mentor the results he had already achieved. When no one saw, he used his magic and the demon helped him in studying the magic chakras. Winter came, and the last leaves that were on the tree withered and began to fall. Snow fell and covered the entire territory of the island. It was very cold, but they still continued to train outside, despite the low temperature. Nothing could stop their training. Jinan had already grown up and became a real man. He already had a strong physique and spent many years studying martial arts techniques. The old man saw his growth, and on that day said that the boy could already try to use these techniques himself. Jin Young gathered his strength and tried to perform all the strikes as close to the ideal as possible. The guy was ready to try this technique. He made the first blow with his fist and felt the incredible power that was in him. He had never felt anything like this before. His movements are incredibly fast, able to carry different punches from different techniques in a matter of seconds. Guyang watched the boy's technique and was proud that he still managed to learn it before that he had such a talented student. The boy threw hundreds of quick blows and felt his body ready to use the most powerful blow of this martial arts technique. He tried to do it there and was surprised at what strength was available to him. He was ready to break a whole rock with one fist. Guyang did not expect that the boy had grown so much and learned this technique, but he was surprised when he saw such a strong blow. Jinan was waiting for what his mentor would say to him from the side because he felt that he was pretty good at this technique. In the look of the old man, he noticed pride in his student. This could be understood without words. Guyang thought that the time had already come to finish the training. He had already taught everything he could teach, and then he had nothing to do here. They returned to their prison cell after training. The guard opened the door and let me in. Jin Young talked about the fact that today was a very hard training, and he hardly coped with all the tasks for the old man did not answer him at all. Jinan was surprised why grandfather was silent. He did not understand what was happening. It seemed to him that he had done something wrong, and grandfather was offended by him. Guyang stood in front of the guy for a long time and was silent at some point. He nevertheless spoke and told him this time to get on the ship in the evening and leave this island. You must leave here. The old man said that he had already managed to agree with Dodge that the boy needed to leave these islands, and the head of the prison was allowed to do this. The boy did not have to worry about the fact that he would then be pursued by security, because the head of the prison himself allowed the guy to leave the island, and he had to do it as quickly and quietly as possible so that no one would know about it. Jinan did not let my head down and sighed heavily. He could not believe that this moment had finally come, and now he was free to leave this island. Gu Yang remembered what this guy looked like when he first arrived on the island. He was still a very young child who did not understand anything. But now I was standing in front of him. A real man who was ready for all life's trials. He was prepared to meet this life. Jin Young joked that when he leaves, the old man will be very bored and lonely. On this island, he is not sure to miss him. Gu Yang laughed and told him that as soon as he sees the guy, he will immediately start working on me with a special thing, and besides, he would need to look after the hairy Uncle Xing, so he will never be bored. Jinan scratched his head with his hand and also laughed. He understood that grandfather was joking, and in fact it was very hard for him to part with him. Jinan began to feel embarrassed, because as soon as he leaves the island, he will begin a new life that he has been dreaming about all this time. He remembered that grandfather had a special request for him that he never voiced, and the guy reminded grandfather of this request. He wanted to know what it was. Gu Yang stood silently for several minutes, as if gathering his strength to voice his request to the boy. It was hard for him to talk about it. Jin Young became nervous when he saw concern in his grandfather's eyes. He could not even imagine what his old man would ask for. Gu closed his eyes and said that now he would tell him everything. He even believed, and could not believe, that this moment had come, and he had the opportunity to ask the guy to fulfill this request. Gu Yang told the boy that he has grown and become very strong, so it's time for him to hear the old man's request. Gu Yang told him everything he wanted to ask him, and the boy was very surprised when he heard it all from his mentor. He could not even think that grandfather could ever ask him to do such an act. The next day, a ship sailed from the island with guards and provisions. On this ship, there was a statue wrapped in fabrics, so as not to get dirty, and no one was supposed to see this statue ahead of time. It was brought onto the ship by a guy with a rewound head. The guard saw him and asked him to be careful with this statue if he does not want to lose his life. Because if something will damage this statue, this will affect everyone who is on the ship. The guard was very surprised when he saw a guy with a rewound head on the ship. I don't understand what this person forgot here. The guy continued to drag the statue despite the fact that the guard yelled at him. The guard was unhappy with the fact that one of the prisoners was standing idle, and he yelled at him and asked him to go help the others to drag this statue, and then scolded him for bringing a sick man with a bandaged head here. The prisoner who is in charge of the recruitment said that this guy is doing a good job even though he has a bandaged head. It's all because he just had a fresh scar on his face and he paid him the boys to save. The guard was very dissatisfied with the fact that this guy decided to save money and took a colleague on the ship. Because of him, we wing to suffer the statue. He asked next time, don't do such things and don't recruit injured workers because it can have a very bad effect on work. The guard asked this man if all the statues were dragged onto the ship, and the man answered him that it was the last statue, now I can't sail. The captain of the ship shouted very loudly that they were now sailing so that everyone was ready to sail. He ordered to raise the anchors and start moving. The ship is sailing a little differently from the coast and heading towards the city. This moment has finally come. The worker, bandaged with his head, decided to go to the edge of the ship and see how the island moves away from them. He was on the back of the deck and watched them carefully as they sailed away. Under the bandaged bandages was Jinan. He could not believe that this moment had finally come, and he managed to leave the island. He always thought that he would leave this island someday and get out of here. But when that moment came, he couldn't believe his eyes. It was so unexpected that he began to miss those times he spent on this island. Jin Young leaned on the railing of the ship and watched the island. He thought that when he returned to the mainland, he had two things to do. The first thing he needed to do was save his father and protect his family. At that moment, on the edge of the cliff, he saw the silhouette of a man. It was Gu Yang. He stood and watched the boy. He came here to look at him for the last time and how his ship was sailing. He came here to say goodbye. It was very hard for the old men to let go of this boy, and he understood that his days would now be ordinary and uninteresting. But it was the right decision to believe the guy had his own path that he had to come. Jinan understood that now he was looking at his grandfather for the last time, and although remember him in his memory, just like that. The old man stood and looked at how the ship was sailing away until it crossed the horizons and disappeared into the depths of the sea. On that day, the old man told the boy that his real name was Guyang Mubak, and even the head of the prison does not know about this, because this is a secret that the old man did not tell anyone, and on the list, he is listed as Guyang Jinen didn't understand why Grandpa kept his name hidden all this time. It was a mystery to him. Grandfather told that his name should not be pronounced outside. It is forbidden, and it is better for no one to know about it, because if everyone finds out about it, then everyone on this island will be killed. Usually even people whose name is similar to his die. Jinnen asked his grandfather how this is even possible. The historian told him that there is one person who is quite capable of this. This man is ready to kill people in droves and mercilessly mock them. The boy asked his grandfather who this man was. The old man put his hand on the boy's shoulder and decided to tell him something. He told him that when the boy gets out of this prison, he will have to find a man named Guyan Mugyong. This man is the old man's brother, and Jinen will have to kill him. Jin Young didn't understand how this was possible. Did Grandpa really want to ask him to kill his own brother? He was sure that he was simply mistaken, and a man named Guyang Mugyong was the very master of the Heavenly Ten who were legendary. The old man confessed that everything is exactly as he says. His brother was indeed a member of the Heavenly 10 martial artists. Oh my God, thought the guy when he found out who he would have to fight because he thought it was incredible. When he first heard that he would need to fight such a monumental warrior, for some reason he immediately remembered his grandfather. He could never even think about the fact that they are somehow connected with each other and can hate each other. Jinnen asked his grandfather why he wants to kill his blood relative and why they have such enmity. The old man told the story that it was not his own brother his parents adopted at a young age. This man was the real big enemy for grandfather. It was the enemy who killed his parents and the people he loved more than anything in the world. Jinnen thought about his grandfather's words. It seemed to him that this was really a good reason to hate this man, and ask him to kill Guyang said that when he returned from 20 years of wandering around the world with his master, that his house had already turned into ruins. It burned with a bright flame, and someone set it on fire. He ran into the house to try to save, but it was too late. Everyone he loved so much was killed at the hands of his brother. He sobbed and could not stop his tears, because the whole world that he had been building for so long collapsed right before his eyes. In one moment, he did not notice how his brother approached him from behind, and although he finished the work he had begun, his hands were bloody. On this ball was the blood of his parents, and the blood of all the people he loved. Brother made a blow with his sword right in the back like a vile rat. He dragged Guyang's wounded body in the rain through the mud for several kilometers. Even in his fading consciousness, he could not ask his brother why he did this. It was a terrible act. But this cruel man nevertheless gave him an answer to this question, and said that he did it in order to pay off the debt and return everything that belonged to him by right. Guyang couldn't understand him then. He didn't understand his motives. It all looked very strange, as if his brother had just gone crazy. He was not a natural child in this family, but still everyone treated him like a family member, and no one understood why he decided to do this with our family. He ruined himself to kill all the people who took care of him from childhood. He killed those who gave him a roof over his head and adopted him into the family. Killed his parents, who raised him for 30 years. Guyang still did not understand what kind of debt it was that cost the lives of all his families. He still doesn't know what his secret was. He never found out why his brother went mad. It was a secret that had to be unraveled. The old man said that he was very lucky when the water threw him onto this particular island, but his body was irreparably damaged because early on the sword was very deep. You had to give up revenge on your brother. The old man said that after he got to this island, he gave up all his attempts to take revenge and just began to live on until he met a boy. At that moment, he ignited a new idea to take revenge on his brother through a guy. He saw his inner strength and enchanting abilities that grew every day and saw how the guy trains hard. It became clear to him what he wants. The old man, without thinking twice, decided to ask the boy to fulfill his request, because it was exactly what he sincerely wanted: revenge on his brother. This is what he truly wanted to get, but he himself could not do it, so the guy was the perfect opportunity and weapon for revenge. However, the old man admitted that he could not force the boy to do this task against his will, because it would be very cruel of him. Gu Yang. Ask the boy directly if he will fulfill his request after he has taken care of his business. Jinan understood that now a lot depends on him. He had to make an insanely important decision of his life and give an answer to the old man. He understood that he needed to kill a person against his will, a person whom he did not even know. But he heard a rather long story about why this person deserved to die demon all this time. I watched the boy while he remembered the conversation with his grandfather. This was their last conversation. The demon was delighted when the boy finally woke up and decided to himself. Now he could calmly talk to her. The boy replied that he had already woken up. He needed to get down to business. Jinan left the hold and went to the edge of the deck to look at the sea. The demon said that today was very cloudy in the sea. Nothing was visible, it was true, because in such weather it is dangerous to sail on the sea. Jinan continued to stand and look into the distance. He thought about everything that had happened to him lately. He admitted that thanks to his grandfather on the island, nothing happened to him. No terrible situations happened because his grandfather constantly protected him. And the fact that the guy got up much stronger was also the merit of his grandfather. The demon was unhappy that they forgot about him, reminded the guy that he taught him magic, which played a huge role. Certain said that maybe he was looking after the boy to use him for revenge, but the demon does everything disinterestedly, only because he is with the boy all the time, and the guy admitted that the demon may be quite right. But nevertheless, no matter how it was, and no matter what goals the grandfather pursued, the boy would still fulfill his request and kill his brother. He said that he did not know the intentions of the old man, but since it happened and he helped him all this time, then you need to pay this old man somehow, because he deserved it. In addition, the guy understood the feelings of his grandfather and understood his pain. After all, it's not every day that people lose a family. The demon told that it was very difficult for him to understand this old man. After all, he never had a family, and he doesn't even know what it is. Since not both began to drip rain and fall on the deck of the ship, Jinan and the demon don't expect it to rain. This was bad news for them, as it could start a storm. The demon didn't want it to rain because they could get wet here and then get sick, so he suggested that the guy go back inside and not get wet in the rain. He didn't want to just keep silent in the rain, and hoped that it was just the most ordinary rain without any of their consequences. An hour later, the sea became very disturbing, and a storm began, and all the workers who were on deck went out to see what was happening. No one understood how dangerous this weather was. The waves brought more and more began to shake the deck in different directions. The ship could no longer swim calmly. It was necessary to maintain balance correctly, so that the ship did not capsize the captain of the ship in this weather, because the wind was getting stronger, and the waves were getting bigger and stronger. This could damage the ship. One of the crew members approached the captain and asked what was happening with the ship. He noticed that certain problems were starting. The captain replied that everything was in order. Nothing special was happening. In front of him stood the caretaker, and he tried to explain to him that the wind became stronger because of this. The ship began to rock strongly. The captain asked the caretaker to go back to his cabin and not get wet in the rain, because there was a very strong wind and rain, and it was very dangerous here. But at some point they looked up and saw, besides being very scary, something that frightened them. Even Jin Young was very scared when he saw this natural disaster. The sky seemed to be angry with them and gathered all its anger into one huge lightning that struck the water not far from them. This lightning created a strong explosion, and the water began to scatter in different directions. One of the sailors made the assumption that thunderstorms are starting now, which meant that these are the worst conditions for sailing. Their ship could simply sink from one lightning strike. But if thunderstorms start now, then they say there will not be very much. The sailors began to run frightened in half, and they did not understand what to do. After all, if a thunderstorm starts now, then there will be a strong wind and a lot of lightning along with it. This means that the probability that they will swim out of here was very low, and most likely everyone will die. The captain of the ship shouted very loudly and made everyone calm down. He said that they would leave the epicenter, and everything would be fine. There was no need to create a panic on the deck. and all that was needed was to lower the sails and hold on to the pillars so as not to fly away. Jinnen understand that all the sailors who are on deck are now very much panicked and could not calm down. This had to be somehow resolved because they were absolutely ineffective at the moment. The demon also began to tense up a little due to such weather conditions. He assumed that the space wall had opened, and that's why it's here now. Such disgusting weather. Jinnen was surprised when he heard the demon's suggestion. He asked him to repeat what he said again, but the demon refused. Sertan asked the guy to look, and because he saw there was not something terrible, Jinnen turned his head, and when he saw the catastrophe that was approaching them, he froze in place. He seemed to be frozen and could not move. After a couple of seconds, I realized the whole catastrophe terribly approaching them and shouted to all the sailors not to grab for something and hold on tight. Their ship hit the most terrible place right at the epicenter of a large wave, the size of a 9th wave, that could absorb and turn the ship over several times and pull it apart. This wave could destroy the entire crew. Jinnen understood that a catastrophe was approaching them that could destroy them all and did not know what to do now. The ship dived under the water, along with all the crew members. The statue they were supposed to bring to the Imperial Palace also dived under the water, and they were all on the verge of drowning. Jinnen almost suffocated while underwater, but at some point, he still managed to wake up and come to his senses. He held his breath in his chest and began to try to swim up in order to get more air into his lungs. He tried to get to the top of the water as quickly as possible. His physical fitness helped him swim out quickly, despite being in very deep water. When he finally managed to get out of the water and take a breath, he felt that it was now raining very heavily. Jinnen understood that the moss would die at any second, but still, he managed to survive due to the fact that he woke up in time. He looked around and saw that the ship was no more. He did not understand what had happened. The ship, along with the people, went underwater. Everything was destroyed, and many people died. They could not swim out. Jin Young began to understand the full scale of this tragedy. He became ill from the fact that so many people died. The demon again? I asked the boy to look ahead, and there was a giant wave. The demon asked the boy to use some kind of magic to get out of this place. Jinnen, without thinking twice, uses the magic of flight in order to fly away from here and not get into this wave. He pushed off the surface of the water and was able to take off the air a sufficient distance so that he was not hooked by a wave. He levitated into the air and watched what was happening in the sea below him. Certain was happy as a child when he realized that they managed to take off. But the guy would not be so happy because he had to keep his balance in the air. He decided to take a look around himself and understand what was happening here, but then he felt how he was starting to lose his balance. He lost his balance because at the height of his flight, there was a very strong wind that knocked him down. Jinnen fell into the water and could not continue his levitation. He hit very hard when his body came into contact with the water. He was very angry because even with the magic of flight, it was impossible to get out of this weather around. There were huge waves in the water that killed lightning, and there was a strong wind in the air that did not allow him to fly away. The demon offered to summon a ghost so that he could help them get out of here. But Jinnen thought this was a very stupid idea. Because where are you from here in the middle of the sea moss to be a ghost? He that the demon is just mocking him because it was a very stupid proposal. In addition, in this situation, it is very difficult to use magic Sertan at that moment. I was not joking and was very serious. He said that when the lightning struck, he felt that the spatial gates had opened, and this was a good sign. Jinnen still didn't understand how this dimensional gate could be connected to the summoning of the spirit. It all sounded very strange and unreliable. The demon admitted that when the spatial gates opened, he felt that several creatures appeared from them. At that moment, 2 different worlds that should never have met touched, but through a thunderstorm, weak ties appeared between the worlds, and some amazing creatures began to appear from another world, which the demon felt as if they were not gathering at the lumen of the expanded dimension. The demon was not sure if there was at least one spirit among all these creatures, but he offered to try because it might be a good idea. Jinnen. This idea turned out to be very strange because he had to summon a spirit from another dimension. He believed that it was impossible to scatter the energy remaining inside his body. After all, if he now calls on the spirit, there will be some other creature. This will only aggravate the situation. It was very dangerous to try such methods in such a place in such a difficult situation. If a useless monster like a demon were suddenly caught, then they would simply die here. Sertan was offended when the guy called him a useless demon, but nevertheless said that he did not feel evil, demonic energy here and there would most likely be useful creatures. He already wanted to quarrel with the guy. But then he realized that now was not the time for this, and asked to still call someone already in order to save them. There was simply no other way for them. There was nothing left for them except just to try. Jinan still agreed to this demon's adventure and decided that we really should try. He prepared his hands for this spell and prepared to call. He had very little time and energy. He had to act very quickly. Certain said that he would take care of the most complex details. The guy had only to cast a spell and summon the spirit here. Genie hand forward and called the green seal. He said, the spirit that controls the winds of Mother Nature. I call you, and I want to make a soul contract with you. But unfortunately no one appeared in front of them after they used this spell. Did no one really show up? How is that even possible? Are they really that unlucky? The demon was very upset when no one appeared. He was sure that someone in any way should have appeared in front of them. Jinan reproached the demons for the fact that there was no one. He said that in vain he only spent his strength on summoning this spirit. He regrets his act and that he obeyed this demon, because nothing happened. The magical energy inside him dried up a little, but suddenly the face of a girl with green hair appeared in front of his face. She asked where she was now. It was a small fairy. He managed to summon a creature here, but it was a palm-sized fairy. She asked the guy if he wanted to conclude, or he still decided to change his mind. Jinan was surprised when he saw a fairy in front of his face. He really did not expect that they would succeed with this spirit summoning idea. The fairy said that she had very little time, and the guy needed to answer faster if he really wants to conclude a contract. Jinan was very surprised when the fairy asked him to hurry up. He did not expect the spirits to be able to be busy. She did not make her repeat the same thing several times, but still said it again. It was you, though, to make a contract with me. She reminded the guy that the wind is getting stronger. He needs to think faster because she just crossed over the dimensional walls, and Jinan was very tired. He replied that he really wants to sign a contract with her. You were not calm. Usually this feeling is rare, but this day was filled with various terrible events. The guy said that if this fairy is the spirit of the wind, she can make a contract with him and save him, when the fairy looked at the guys and said that he had no magic at all and he didn't suit her. In this case, he asked her to conclude a contract with her soul and the spirit of the wind, and swore before God that he would fulfill the terms of this contract. She said, I, Sylphina, admit that I made a contract with you. She looked at him carefully and decided to make sure once again how useful this person could be to her. Sylphine raised her hands up and began to yawn. She said that she wanted to rest now because she was very tired. She began to look around herself and did not understand what kind of place this was. She decided to find out as much as possible about this place, but the guy did not like it. Jinan asked the demon if all spirits behave as strangely as this, and the demon told her that he did not know. He thought that this girl is very immature, so she behaves like that. He confessed that one stupid one was enough, and now he also has a stupid demon girl who does not want to do anything. Demons began to dislike the fact that the guy constantly insults him. He warned them that the storm was intensifying and the lightning was getting bigger. They had to get out of here as quickly as possible. Jinan began to panic because the situation was getting worse. He had already stopped hoping that my year would get out of here and before it was too late, he asked the spirit to take them away from here, and the girl just started to panic. Thought about getting rid of him as soon as possible because he was already starting to bother her. She parted your magic and parted the water into 2 halves in order to be able to pass here. Normally, then she began to clear the sky. Here are the clouds. Jinan was very surprised when he saw the ability of this fairy. With just one spell, she was able to clear the sky of terrible weather. This ability proved the power of this little fairy. She smiled and looked at their reaction because she was very proud of herself for being able to move the clouds and create good weather.